So what you're saying is pretty much the banks that are in Canada that are chartered by Parliament and all that,
Yep.
by Parliament,
Yep.
are pretty much just robbing the Canadian government and in turn the Canadian citizens because they're causing us to have a higher tax rate than required.
Yeah, that's
You
exactly
know,
it.
just to dig into their pockets and get themselves a little
Right.
bit richer.
So what could you do with $160 million every day?
Oh my god. What I would do, I would pay off my school, I would pay off my parents' mortgage. Like, holy, I'd go on like 10 trips.
Let's start out with 160 million for a lifetime. Never mind a day, buddy, because
Right.
I'd be in a forever party.
Well,
No
actually,
idea. 160 million? Like, that's so much money. I wouldn't even know what to do with it.
You'd become pretty selfish, I think, right? You'd be self-centered, that's for sure, because you wouldn't have anything to care about.
If you really wanted to, you could buy the Maple Leafs franchise just after a few days and still have millions left over to party with. Probably to try and forget that you bought the Leafs franchise. Or you could buy enough beer to keep the whole country wasted 24/7. I think we'd get a lot of votes for that.
I got an idea. How about as an incentive to pay off the debt, we start stacking the payments with $100 bills and create a new national monument? Think about it.
The CN Tower stands about a quarter-mile high. If we stacked our debt using $100 bills, we could create the first ever money tower, totaling 540 miles high. That would dwarf the CN Tower, and it may help with our space exploration. Talk about a tourist attraction. But let's not get over our heads. First things first, we have to change this picture. Because federal and provincial debt combined, we still owe about $800 billion. Plus, every time we make those $60 billion payments, a good chunk of that goes to compounded interest alone. In other words, when we make these $60 billion payments, we may only see about $50 billion taken off. And when you think about how we've already spent about $1.5 trillion over the years on a debt that we still have, any new debt our government gets us into turns into that number times much more. I know some of you may be asking, why on earth would the government keep digging themselves a hole of debt to get out of debt? Well, obviously you don't come from Canada. You see, in Canada, when we dig ourselves into a hole, we don't use anything innovative like, let's say, a ladder to get us out. No, we just keep using the same shovel that got us there in the first place. I guess we figure that since the Earth is round, we should get somewhere eventually. So, we just keep digging. Keep digging until we find ourselves in a whole new world. And even if it looks scary, we're told it's the only way. Is there, would you say, a fundamental problem? Is there an underlying problem in the monetary system, or is this the way it should be?
No, I don't think there's an underlying problem in the monetary system. The credit is a good thing.
Okay, well, how's the rest of the world doing then? What? The Earth is $52 trillion in debt? To who? Pluto? Guess again.
Okay, so the money system in Canada clearly doesn't benefit the people. Why hasn't anyone told us about this?
Once a nation parts with the control of its currency and credit, it matters not who makes that nation's laws. Usury once in control will wreck any nation. Until the control of the issue of currency and credit is restored to government and recognized as its most conspicuous and sacred responsibility, all talk of the sovereignty of Parliament end of democracy is idle and futile.
Who are you?
Well, I was only the 10th Prime Minister of Canada.
Whoa. Well, you definitely won't hear any of our current politicians say something nearly that profound.
Yes, and now I'm ironically on the $50 bills.
That sucks, man.
Tell me about it.
Well, that's just one Prime Minister of Canada's thoughts on money. No big deal, right?
The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest creative opportunity. The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest, money will cease to be master, and become the servant of humanity.
You too, Lincoln?
For once, someone listened to what I said.
Sorry, I just never read those statements in any school textbooks before.
I made it clear that my greatest accomplishment as being president was that I killed the bank. And yet I too am ironically on the face of everything I was so passionately against.
And then the private banks put your faces on their corrupt money? No offense, guys, but that's incredibly disgraceful.
Especially after being assassinated.
I'll say.
I managed to escape.
Right here, buddy.
Whoever controls the volume of money in our country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. When you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled one way or another by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate.
Hey Garfield, weren't you president for only like 4 months?
Well, I was killed shortly after making that comment.
Oh yeah, good point. Well, anyone else?
I myself prefer my New Zealand eggs for breakfast.
Isn't it kind of sad that we have to dig up what our dead leaders had to say about money, instead of trusting the ones that are alive and in office today? I mean, we've seen how little they know about how the system works.
So do provincial governments ever borrow money from, let's say, chartered banks?
No.
No?
No.
That's just federal?
No. As far as I know, I couldn't tell you offhand.
And it's just, I just don't know why the government doesn't just borrow money from the Bank of Canada, as it states like in the Constitution and in the Bank of Canada Act, that the government has the right to do such things to prevent things like debt from happening.
Well, it's you may know more about it. Obviously, you've researched it a little bit more than I have.
I know that they have ratings on their basis, which when they do borrow funds, they get an interest rating. And yeah, yes, they will borrow money from banks.
Now, Canada is like the fly in the ass of an elephant in terms of the overall importance in the world.
Well, I'm not an economist. The Prime Minister is.
Let's be clear about what the situation is. We have not been following the same policies as the United States. The economic and financial mess in the United States is disastrous. The policies have been irresponsible. We've made very different choices in Canada. We have a budget that's in surplus, not a budget that's in deficit. We're paying off debt in Canada, not adding to our debt.
Are your policies working?
Look, I would say that overall we're being successful. We're keeping the economy on course. We're not going into a recession. We have a slowdown. But we are not in the kind of economic crisis we have in the U.S. And the world is entering an economic period unlike and potentially as dangerous as anything we have faced since 1929.
What happened that me, normally a very staid banker, will lend you the money to buy a home that you don't think?
Well, first of all, is it actually money that they're lending people?
Oh yeah, they're money. They're lending you money.
Is it actual money, or is it?
It's real money.
It's not a receipt to present money?
No, it's real money.
Isn't there a difference between bank credit?
Well, yes, there is, but let's go back. Don't change the subject.
I know economists will say, well, we could, run a small deficit, but the problem is that once you cross that line, as we see in the United States, nothing stops deficits from getting larger and larger and spiraling out of control.
Okay.
But wait a minute. Unless you want to you're asking me what was the cause of the current crisis.
Well, no, I just want to know where money comes from.
Well, let me tell you something. Let me just take it one step further, despite the fact that's not where you want to go.
I don't think we've necessarily lost control of our currency, and there are always restrictions in a global market in terms of how much control you have over your currency.
But I want to go back to the real thing, because this is really you'd asked the question at the very beginning, but the financial crisis that we're in.
Well, it was just where does money come from? I'm not. Yeah, it is.
No, but wait a minute. But it's really important to understand.
We obviously don't agree on everything, but he understands that, I think everybody understands that Canada's a sovereign country, and whether it's dealing with the United States or dealing with China, the fact that a country's a lot bigger doesn't stop us from standing up for our interests and values.
Still need convincing about how ridiculous the monetary system is? It costs 4 cents to make 1 cent, which makes no sense. Or would it make sense to make no sense? Well, this brings me to my next question. Who physically prints our government dollar bills?
The money itself is printed by the Royal Canadian Mint.
The Royal Canadian Mint and the Bank of Canada?
No, the Bank of Canada is responsible for monetary policy, but the actual physical production of dollar bills and $5 bills, no longer dollar bills, but of bills and denominations and coins is by the Royal Canadian Mint.
Okay.
Mainly in Winnipeg.
Okay, new rule. If you control the nation's money, you should probably know who prints it.
I spoke to Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, and I asked him, where does money come from? Like, who physically actually prints the dollars in Canada? And he told me it was the Canadian Mint.
Yeah, the Canadian Mint. The Canadian Mint prints the dollars and prints and does the coins.
But I thought it was the Bank of Canada that contracts the work to print.
Well, the Bank of Canada is the central bank, but the Mint is responsible for providing the currency.
Then why does it say on the Bank of Canada's website that they are the country's sole banknote issuing authority? Let's try calling the Mint and ask them ourselves. Do you guys have anything to do with printing the dollar bills in Canada?
There is a dollar bill in Canada.
But does the Canadian Mint have anything to do with printing dollar bills in Canada?
No.
None?
No. That's the Bank of Canada. Do you want me to get your phone number?
Oh, you may want to tell that to the Finance Minister.
Pardon?
I said you may want to tell that to the Finance Minister.
Okay.
He doesn't know.
Okay. So, sorry, I didn't know about that.
No, it's okay. So just maybe make a memo for him though. So it is the Bank of Canada who's responsible for printing our dollars, but they don't do the actual printing themselves. They contract the work to 2 private companies, the Canadian Banknote Company and BA International, which as of 1999 was bought by a privately owned multi-billion-dollar German company called Geisek and Devrient. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, which is scary considering that they're in control of printing our dollars. A few things about this German company Geisek and Devrient. They're the second largest banknote printing company in the world, And they've been involved with the printing of banknotes for two separate